put out doing some more small table stuff. So if you want to eat, do that, or wait till the end to eat or whatever. But there's some good food there from yesterday's.
Plenty of food.
Plenty of food. So we won't let you leave hungry if you just want something to eat.
Yeah. Thank you.
What I want to do right now is just spend a little bit of time just kind of unpacking the APEST inventory in general and just telling you a little bit about a little bit more about these inventories and these tools that we have that are really helpful. And this is just one of several that up in the Diocese of Pittsburgh we used a lot. I worked within the context of a Secretariat for Leadership and Evangelization for about 5 years up in and we created an institute for pastoral leadership and managed to lead the presbyterate through 6 months of formation and leadership and strength-based approach to ministry. And the deacons, a good handful of the deacons, through the same program. And then we got about 250 of our lay ecclesial ministers through the first year of a certification program we had created in the diocese around all of this, and then everything shut down because of
COVID.
No, it wasn't COVID. It was the Pennsylvania grand jury report.
Right there, all
It was a kind of a perfect storm of the diocese that was consolidating its parishes, and the Pennsylvania grand jury report came out, and in fact, it was 2018, the Feast of the Assumption. And it just decimated central administration financially, as you can imagine. People stopped giving to.
They get pissed. They get mad.
Yeah. Even though the truth was, I like to say this, is there was not a single new bit of news about any of the cases. They were all at least 20 years old or more. They'd all been dealt with, and they'd all been publicized in the newspapers. And so what Josh Shapiro, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, managed to do was reveal the classified records of the incidences of what happened. So now parishioners got to read what their pastors did to the children in detail. And it was grotesque. And it just wasn't of God. Every single case had been dealt with in the criminal courts. There was no new news. But it was so upsetting to people. And particularly to our secretariat, because probably some of the most important work that had been done in recent times in the Diocese of Pittsburgh just ended. So anyway, it's very sad, but
it's bad it happened, but it's like 3 out of 1,000.
Yeah.
And you have the three were all anybody wanted to hear about.
Yeah, right.
Fret thy not.
Yeah. So, but this is so we've since about 2014. A lot of experience in this space, and we've seen just incredible fruits with the work that we did do over the 5 years. It was, discovering your gifts and how God has created you and gifted you can be, for a lot of people, one of the most exciting and exhilarating discoveries in their life of faith. I've never seen anything like people just were like, wow, like I had no idea that there was a name for any of this, that God cared about any of this, that this is a thing. What's beautiful about today is that there are these tools that we have now that we didn't have in the ancient church, where you can get on a computer and fill out these things and get these reports back to you. That's really kind of a mirror image of yourself, where you can really see yourself for who you are. And one of the things that's challenging for us in our own growth and maturity as disciples of Jesus is learning to accept ourselves for who we are. And part of that process of accepting those gifts that we have is also realizing that we have to be redeemed, because for every gift we have, sometimes our strength can also be our greatest weakness. And one of the things that's great about this report, besides describing, kind of your profile there in terms of what gifts you seem to have, and giving you some nice Bible verses that support the gift, it also shows you how people perceive you, can perceive you, and where maybe some of your blind spots can be. And it's important because we have to have the humility to be able to see where maybe we use our gifts in ways that are either excessive or defective. Like we don't bring them. We're too afraid of our own shadows, so we sit there quietly and we don't step up. Or when we step up, maybe we knock a few people over on the way because we're a little too strong. So we need to be redeemed in Christ and grow in the virtues that help refine how we use those gifts. And, so like, just as an example in my own life, when I was a child, my nickname was Motor Mouth. And then later on, I became known as the Energizer Bunny because he just kept on going. So I had to discover the off switch on my back that people could turn me off when I was going on too long. But that's been a work in progress. Now, the strength is, I have the gift of gab. So, I can stand in front of a group of people with very little preparation and know exactly what I need to say. My wife, on the other hand, will sit there and prepare for weeks. And weeks and weeks and weeks. She gives great presentations, but she prepares. I don't even know how you do that. It's like, I don't know either. I just can't. But the downside of that is, I've been known to be an hour and a half late for dinner because I got into a conversation and my wife didn't know where I was. So I had to learn how to, temper my tongue, bridle it a little bit. Right? So that's just an example of how, with the natural gifts that we're given, they have to be perfected in Christ and elevated by the grace of our baptism and refined so that they become as useful in the hands of God as they possibly can be. All right, so let's look at APEST here. As I said earlier, APEST the inventory was developed by a theologian by the name of Alan Hirsch, and he draws us out of Ephesians chapter 4. And the thing that I like to tell Catholics is that typically when we look at Ephesians 4 and we hear the fivefold gifts, we think of offices in the church. The bishop is the apostle. Well, the bishop is the evangelist too. And while the bishop is the primary teacher, like what ends up happening is the only people in our church who seem to have these gifts are the clergy. And I like to say there's really two ways that we can interpret Ephesians 4. There clearly is a reference to the offices that are listed here. So you'll notice, on the opening page, you'll see that I have STL and STD after my name, which stands for License of Sacred Theology and Doctorate of Sacred Theology. And so I always say I first got a licentiate, and then I got an STD. And that doesn't work in English very well. But that license is a pontifical degree. So I do hold an office of teacher, and I swore an oath when I taught at the seminary. To teach at the seminary, you have to have a license. And when you assume your faculty role, you have to swear an oath of fidelity to the magisterium of the church under penalty of eternal damnation. That's a heavy oath. So if I'm going to challenge the church on something, I have to make sure I cross my T's and dot my I's and that I'm sure of what I'm saying. Otherwise, it's my responsibility simply to uphold and pass on the teaching of the church in the name of Christ, under the authority of the bishop that I happen to work with. So when I first came to speak here, Sister had me fill out a form that had to be filled out by my pastor or someone in the diocese to attest to the fact that I'm a faithful participating member of the church. Okay? That's all very official business. That's the office of apostle or the office of teacher. Okay? Working. But what Alan is trying to get at here is that there are also charisms here. People have natural gifts and spiritual gifts that make them particularly good at being either apostles, evangelists, prophets, teachers, or shepherds in the church. It's kind of the church's DNA, or its missional code. And the research that Alan has done has really shown that when all 5 of the gifts are not fully operational within any community of faith, that community flounders. It actually shrinks. So we're shrinking, and there's a lot of research that he's done that actually backs that up. So the healthiest communities he's ever seen, he calls this 5Q, is what he calls it. 5Q, APEST, Ephesians 4. When 5Q is fully operational in the community will be vibrant and it'll grow. So that's a good litmus test if we're shrinking. It's probably because we're not cultivating the gifts that the Spirit has given for the building up of the church. It's very simple. One of the things that we do as Catholics too is we sometimes place ourselves within the culture wars, and we inadvertently project onto the world the internal problems that the church has, and we blame the world for our own problems. But we have to realize that the world does not have the Holy Spirit, we do. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be conquering the world for Christ fruitfully and successfully, according to the model that Christ left us, right? Jesus started with a very small number of people, 12 apostles, maybe 70 close followers, maybe 500 more kind of loose followers. That's a very small number of people for having spent 3 years on this earth. But he did that on purpose. He invested, just think about this. The eternal God became one of us, and he spent most of his time in the 3 years of his public ministry with 12 men. Most people would say that is not a model for growth. But he poured into them and he taught them by discipling them and calling them to the apostolic ministry. He taught them how to go and make disciples. That's why his last will and testament before he ascends is, go make disciples. Just the way I've shown you to do it. By the end of 3 centuries, there were 20 million disciples of Jesus Christ. And they did not have the internet. They did not have parishes. They did not have bulletins. They just had people that shared the faith with their neighbors, with their family members. And they gave witness to others about the profound impact that Jesus Christ had on their life. And they contributed to the church the gifts that they had. And the church grew. Somewhere along the line, we became too institutionalized. And while institutions are very efficient, they don't exercise all of the members of Christ's body. That's the problem with institutions. We need to have them, but when we rely on them too much to do the work of mission, what we are in effect doing is allowing a very, very small percentage of the members of Christ's body to do the lion's share of the work of mission in the church. And that is not what the early church did. Everybody was participating in the mission of the church according to Paul's ecclesiology. So we got to get back to this. And we have these powerful tools now. This is just one of them. We also use Gallup Strength Finders, which is an incredible inventory. It's $40 to get a list 34 strengths that you have. And the beautiful thing about it is when you take these inventories, when you look at these 5 gifts and those numbers, or you look at Gallup's 34 strengths and you see the sequencing of those gifts, the odds of there being another human being, like it's I don't know what the odds are. It's probably 1 in a million people would end up having the same sequence and roughly the same numerical value. Like you are unique. You are really your own person. And it's not just the number one strength that matters. It's the way your strengths combine. So with the APEST inventory, the top 2 tend to be really important. So that's the way they do it. So sister is a TP, a teacher prophet. So she's going to have I'm a TA. So the way we teach is going to be different because her prophetic gift is going to be informing her teaching. And my apostolic is going to be informing my teaching. Does it make sense? So when you're looking at your number, now again, I think 45 is the highest number on the APEST, and so it's not good or bad, whatever your score is. It just is what you put in there. So there's no judgment in it at all, and you don't need to make a judgment. If all of your scores are really low, which I've never seen that happen before, then you probably need to take it again because maybe you were overthinking or but generally speaking, when people take this again, if you took it right the first time, you're going to get pretty much the same thing the next time. The numbers might shift a little bit, but the basic order of them is going to be pretty consistent. And that's the same with Gallup. Gallup has 40 million of these inventories in their database. 40 million, that's a lot. And there's very little fluctuation in the top 5 strengths that people have. Strengths will switch positions 1 or 2 numbers, but
Is Gallup geared more secular?
it's
Does it seem to be more
it's
spiritual?
a secular gifting inventory, but it was started by a Christian person back in the 50s actually, and it's just it's a great inventory because it really tells you what your natural abilities are, where you have natural strength. So, for example, when you take the combination of my top 5, I have a lot of strategic gifts. So so how does that map then against the APEST? Well, strategic gifts are things like intellection, input. Like a lot of my academic gifts live in that in the strategic category, but they also show up in the A. I'm apostolic. Apostolics like to create new things. So I like to solve problems. Here's a problem, here's how we're going to solve it. Strategy. That's the strategy. So when I saw my TA come up, I'm like, well, that's no surprise to me. But when I looked at Gallup helped me see, well, here are the talents that I have that make me really good at being a T and the A. That's kind of funny, just on a personal level, in my own prayer life, my own journey, it was really hard when everything shut down at the diocese. And I didn't know what to do, and this opportunity came along to start this organization. And I really didn't want to start an organization, I'll be honest with you. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to spend my life fundraising so I can pay myself to go out and fundraise so I can pay myself. And I'm going to pay someone else to teach. So how is this going to work? And I was assured it'll all be fine. Well, 3 years in, I'm doing a lot of administration and very little teaching, so I'm grateful to be here this morning. But in prayer, it's like, Lord, I want to be back in the classroom. I want to be back in the classroom. And the Lord keeps saying to me, I know, but you have other gifts, and I need you to use them. And it's that A. He's like, yep, we're cranking up the A right now. I need you to create this organization because the work you were doing in the diocese, it has to keep going. And we just are going to do it in a different context. But it's like, yeah, but the A is getting a little bigger than I like. Because, being an entrepreneur, being an innovator, it's hard work. And I'm good at teaching, and it's easy. I can get up and just,
Post.
it's fun.
Talk.
It's like, but the Lord says, but you have to grow. I've given you other gifts, and you got to develop them. So get to work. I'm not feeling sorry for you. Okay.
Is that the kind of perspective we should have about the areas that the scores are lower?
With APEST, yeah, so we all have the capacity to do all 5 areas, but we're going to have a strong proclivity and strong inclinations, and those areas are going to be much easier for us where we have the highest strength. So it's always a discernment. First and foremost, what is God asking me to do? And then how do I use my gifts to accomplish his will? So right now I'm leaning into my A strengths, and I've had to use prophetic is my 3rd, and I've had to use that quite a bit too, with my own staff. It's interesting, but it's like I can see where the Lord's taking this, and I know what the Lord wants us to do, and I know you all think we've got to go this way, but we're going this way. And they don't like that. Or I have to call them to accountability. It's like, you know what? How can we go out there and facilitate people and teach other people how to do the very thing that we can't do at our own meetings? That's my prophetic. It's very uncomfortable. So we can practice all of these gifts because the Spirit can enable all of that. But we ought to try to align ourselves as much as we can with our strengths, because we're gonna contribute the most. So I have a person on my staff who's number 1 prophet. And I'll be honest with you, I can't stand most of what comes out of her mouth. I'll be honest with you. It's like, but at every meeting, it's like, I just have to grin and bear it, but it's like she's right too much of the time. It's like, I just have to take my, she'll, and I just was in a meeting with her last week, and she's like, unfortunately, I had to let someone go, and she just looked at me and she says, you know that what we're going to do is going to be spiritually attacked, and you need to be on your watch for it. I'm like, I am on my watch for it. You don't have to tell me this. She's like, you're not doing enough. Okay.
Thank you, Jeremiah.
But she's the prophet. She's always going to just speak what she hears the Spirit saying. Thank you, Jesus. I get to grow. Isn't this wonderful? Patience and forbearance, because I love my sister. Yes, I love my sister, right? So it's very real. It's very real. But so it's good to learn what other people have, and it's good to allow the Spirit when the Spirit says, you're in a moment right now, and T is your lowest strength, but I got to be the teacher right now. I lean into the Spirit, and I let the Spirit bring that out of me. But don't try to make yourself into a T, because there's going to be other people that are T's that are really good at it. So, let them do it.
But maybe it's really good though that we all have different strengths, because sometimes when we're in our lows, that other person can pick us up. But
right.
Sometimes you're just so tired, you can't see it, and you need somebody else.
Yeah. Generally, the way you're going to recognize your own strengths is you're going to feel energized when you're doing that thing. And energy is important in ministry. So you can't be draining your batteries. You can't be depleting yourself more than you're being energized by what you're doing, because you're going to burn out, and then you're going to be a bear on everybody else because you're just complaining all the time. So where you feel energized. So, for example, again, I hope you don't mind, I'm always referring to myself, but I know myself the best, so I can give examples from my own life. I made a truce with the benefactor who came to me, and I said, I am not going to stop teaching. Like, I'm going to have a faculty position. I'm still going to at least adjunct, and I do. Still teach at St. Vincent's. I taught at Franciscan this last spring. And I'm going to be out there doing things like this, because if I am doing administration all the time, I'm going to die. I'm going to curl up like a dead spider in the corner. And I will not let that happen. So, because I get energized. So, one class a week for me is enough to get me through all of the administrivia that I can't stand doing. Okay? But I got to do it because I got that strategic gift, and I'm getting better at there's people on my organization that are really good with details. I'm not. And I'm getting better at just saying, hey, I trust you. You make that decision. I don't need to make that decision. You think we need this or that? Kathy, you go for it. That's your strength. We learn to lean on each other and rely on each other. And if it's not exactly the way we think it should be, from our seat on the bus, we just rejoice. Anyway, nothing's perfect. There's no perfect way of doing anything in this life anyway. So, so we can use these inventory through self-discovery. We can use these inventories to discover other people. And then we can use these inventories to figure out how to create a cohesive team where we learn how to respect and reverence one another's gifts and lean into them and deploy them. Okay. All right, so let me go through individually just some definitions so that we can, flesh that out a little bit for you all. All right, so starting with the apostle. Apostles are those who are sent, and they extend, like quite literally in the New Testament. Peter, Paul, the 12, the apostles, they were sent by Jesus to extend the territory, to extend the reach. Now that might not be geographic, but it will be demographic for sure. So one of the things that the apostles are really good at doing is figuring out who's not here. And how do we go get those people? People have lots of reasons for not showing up. They could be scandalized. They could have just kind of drifted away. Their lives got too busy. Maybe they felt their faith was irrelevant to their lives anymore. So the apostles are the ones who want to go out and try to bring in and try to extend the reach, extend the territory. They're outward-facing people. All right, so that's the apostle. Again, we're not talking about the office of bishop. We're talking about the charism, the apostolic charism. Now, a bishop should be concerned with this. He should be concerned with all of these gifts. But he may not be the one who can be effective in that space on his own. He needs other people who can do that. Okay. The prophet, one who questions and reforms. Prophets are sensitive to God and what is important to him. So they're the ones that always call the community or call us to accountability, to a standard of excellence. Thus saith the Lord. We read from the prophets a lot. A lot of times we think prophets are prophets in the Old Testament are ones who could see into the future, and certainly that's part of the prophetic charism. That can be part of that gift, that they can see ends. They can see ends. That is where things are headed or where things ought to go. And they can see that with great clarity. The prophets are at times the ones who can read the sign of the time, see what's going on now and say, well, given this set of conditions, if we keep going like this is where we're going to be in 10 years. 10 years comes along, it happens just like that, and you're like, how did you know that? How could you see that? But they're also really good at seeing what's going on right now and saying, this isn't good. We need to change. And so oftentimes the prophets would challenge the kings in the Old Testament to the responsibilities of their kingship. You're not governing your God's people with his own heart. You're not, that was always the role of the prophets. And of course the kings never liked the prophets because the kings became complacent and comfortable or perhaps decadent in their rule. And the prophets were annoying to them, and so much so at times they killed them.
Threw him in the cistern.
What's that? Yeah, threw him in the cistern. Yeah, we had Jeremiah in the mud this morning, right? So yeah, John the Baptist. John the Baptist spoke the inconvenient truth to Herod, Herod was very intrigued by John. But as soon as John turns his attention to his adulterous affair, he was, well, poor Herod. He kind of got caught between his two vices, women and pride. And, he poor John's head came off from it. But that happened. So the prophets are the ones in our midst who are going to call us to accountability and challenge us to be better as individuals and as community. So they tend to be very much involved in social outreach and issues of justice, but also the internal health of the community. They tend to be the annoying ones who are always calling attention to problems. And we have to learn to listen to them. They also have to learn how to speak in the charity of God. Okay, the evangelist, one who recruits and gathers. They have an attractional quality. Like sometimes, like we think about the people who greet the door, there's people that are just really good at it. And there's other people that are just really not good. You really are not called to be a greeter. Like, you look at the ground and you frown all the time. But the evangelist is the one who just connects with people and brings them in. Come join us. They tend to be what in the Gallup strength. There's one of the gifts there is called woo. Woo. They just woo. Like I have one of my board members says number one strength woo, and he goes, when I go to a big gathering of a lot of people, it's like I just look around that room and I look at everybody I don't know and I just can't wait to talk to them. And I'm like, that is not me. Evangelist is number lowest. Talking to a stranger, just going up individually, I get very awkward. It's very hard. Getting up in front of a group of people, no problem. But don't ask me to start a conversation with a stranger. Like if I'm on the bus or on an airplane, I'm just like, I have the screen, don't bother me. See, I'm reading the book right now, don't ask me any questions. Don't start talking about where you're going. I don't want to hear it. That's a personality thing. Now I have to grow, learn how to, maybe the Lord wants me to make a connection with this person for some reason, so I have to stretch, but it doesn't come naturally to me, okay? So evangelists, they recruit and gather. They're always bringing people to the cause, whatever it is, or to the activity, or to the event. So again, if you have under-attended events at your parish, you got to find out who your evangelists are. And they need to go out and they'll get on the phone and call people. Hey, we're having this really awesome whatever, and you got to come. It's going to be great. People go, okay, I'll come. Just because this person has the ability to convince them they should come. Someone else calls them on the phone. Well, we're having this potluck on Saturday night. We were wondering if you'd like to come. No thanks. So find your evangelists. Your shepherds, one who protect and provide. Shepherds take care of people, looking after their needs and making sure the group stays healthy and connected. So the shepherds are the community builders. They make sure everybody's okay. Okay. The sacristan is typically a shepherd. The pastoral associate is typically a shepherd. Okay. The people who go and visit the homebound, those are your shepherds. So we typically make a lot of room for shepherds in the parish. Shepherds and the teachers tend to be the most prevalent. So we need shepherds because the shepherds create a certain stability and continuity in the community, and they help people feel included. And cared for. Someone's looking after them. Okay, a teacher is one who understands and explains. Teachers find great satisfaction in helping people learn truth and wisdom. So, yeah, I can relate to that.
So you score high on teaching.
Yeah, 43 out of 45.
And I like teaching, and I'm a substitute teacher for the county, and I scored low. I don't understand why.
Well, low, like what?
Like 12.
You might be using. What was your number one?
Evangelizing.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're evangelizing.
Evangelizing and teaching while I'm evangelizing.
Yeah, it's not that you're not teaching, but what you're doing there is probably is coming out of this desire to connect with people and bring people in. That's the motivator. That's the thing that's really driving that activity and operating, as opposed to, I've got all this knowledge and I just can't wait for other people to know what I know. I want everybody to understand what I understand. I want everybody to see what I see.
Yeah. That's not me.
Yeah. I mean, my kids call me the sermonator because anytime anytime I have an opportunity to explain something, I will. Because I want everybody to know what's in my head. Just
want to share the wisdom.
Yep.
I understand.
And that's the motivator. That's what drives me to open my mouth. My uncle was that way too. Like my Uncle Brooks, anytime my cousin and I were with him, he was always teaching. We're weeding plants, he's explaining, He was a teacher. Clearly. Should have been a teacher as a stockbroker. I don't know. Guess it made more money. Could have been a university professor. All right. Now, if we look at the secular version of this, okay, so the apostle is the entrepreneur, the innovator, the cultural architect who initiates a new product or service and develops the organization. And your startup people. Now, where are most of the apostles within the church expressing their apostolic gifts?
Councils.
Office people.
Yeah, in the business world. We don't create a lot of space for that. Okay, so we live in an environment where there's just a lot of. So in professional ministry, we have very, very few apostles that work in ministry, and those that do tend to get shut down. Okay, so they go out in the business world. There's no incentive. Okay. The prophet is the questioner, provocateur, who probes awareness and fosters questioning and current programming, leading to organizational learning. So, in any business, there's always those people that are always trying to make the business better, make it more effective and more efficient. We do have prophets, with more prophets than apostles in parishes, but they're oftentimes agitators. They stir the pot. The evangelist is the communicator, recruiter to the organization who markets the ideas or product and gains loyalty to a brand or cause. So the marketing teams of any business are the evangelists. Build brand awareness. I was really excited. Our parish, we just merged. We were in the last group of parishes that merged. We had 4 parishes came together. St. Luke the Evangelist. And the day that we launched, we had a sticker and T-shirts. That's the first time I've ever seen a parish do that. I was like, yes, that's branding. So everybody can put that on their water bottle or and now I'm driving around, it's like, oh, there's a parishioner, there's a parishioner. People are wearing their shirts and they actually look good on people, like they got nice T-shirts, not these oversized ones that look like.
One size fits all.
Yeah. Someone actually did their homework. Our pastor, the staff created gave him a hockey jersey with his name and number and St. Luke the Evangelist. Beautiful, like a professional level jersey. And so at Mass, at the end of Mass, he pulled it out and put it on. Go team. I mean, we're trying to build a sense of unity around an identity, around a brand, and create movement. That's great. Okay. But a lot of people are like, man, we don't have a budget for that.
Sometimes we have to let that
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. All right, the shepherd is the humanizer, people-oriented motivator who fosters a healthy relational environment through the management of meaning. In the best companies, your HR department is doing that. They're not the, chopping block team, but they're more of the how are we creating a healthy human environment in an organization, good communication, healthy conflict, making sure every voice is heard, everybody's included, everybody feels fulfilled and satisfied in their role, etc. That's what a good HR department does. And then finally, the teacher is the philosopher, systems thinker who is able to clearly articulate the organizational ideology in a way as to advance corporate learning. So usually oftentimes members of the executive team in an organization, they get the mission statement, they have the vision statement, and they're very good at educating the organization on why we exist and what we do and how we do it and what our values are, etc. Okay? So the reason why I put the secular version up there is because when you stop and you think about a parish, it's like, do we have these roles?
Yeah, of course
We do, but we in a lot of ways we don't. Like we're not intentional about it enough. We don't. And again, if we know what businesses do this because they realize that they are given a market advantage. The marketplace will punish their business if they don't have a strong HR department, if they don't have a strong marketing division, if they don't have a strong product development, the entrepreneurs, if they don't have these departments, they're going to fail because they're going to get beat, right? But I mean, for Catholics, like we're the indefectible Church of Christ, and we're not going anywhere. The gates of hell will not prevail against us, right? So we rest on our laurels. The Lord promised the church would never vanish from the face of the earth. He did not promise it was always going to be the kind of influencer in the world that it's meant to be. That depends on whether or not we listen to his great teacher, Paul, and try to lean into that ecclesiology. Are we using our gifts, or are we deploying those gifts to build up the body of Christ or not? Okay. All right. A couple more slides here. So this is what the church looks like when all the gifts are operating. There's maturity, supported by the fivefold gifting, that is itself supported by the unity of faith. Again, we have the same origin, a Father in heaven. We have the same adhesive. That's the Spirit. We have the same call, which is charity, patience. That's what makes us one. But that unity is expressed in a diversity of gifts. And when they all have a place to live, the church is strong. What happens when we don't use all of our gifts is that we falter. Now, it's a historical fact that if you go back, say, to the 1800s, when the church in the United States was first being established, we had in the form of different religious communities that traveled the ocean to come here. We had a lot of evangelists, we had a lot of apostles. Think about all those founders and foundresses that created all those congregations that were serving in the mission field for the immigrants that came over. It was so fascinating. I don't remember the name of your foundress. Yes. But just listening to her and filtering her through the APEST, I was like, wow. First of all, I'm curious to know if she's number one prophet, and she's got apostles there too, but she's got to. But at any rate, we had a lot of what we call the apes, the apostles, the prophets, and the evangelists. But as we became established, as these ethnic communities became established, especially in the north, in the eastern, things like, places like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Chicago, and so on. Those were the landing place for a lot of people. There was, over the decades in the 20th century, we became more and more stable, and the pioneers went away, and now we had more and more settlers. And the settlers tend to be the ones that create stability and a kind of uniformity in the community, right? So those tend to be your teachers and your shepherds. Now, I would imagine where there's strong waves of immigration still in this country, like along the southern border, there's still a lot more of the apostolic and the prophetic and the evangelist types, because there's a pressing need. But those are not always the people that occupy the offices. The teachers and the shepherds tend to occupy the offices and tend to be very conservative and very cautious in their governing style. And so up in the Northeast, where I'm at, we're dealing with a demographic implosion. We're constantly closing, and it's a very hard battle to say, Bishop, where are the apostles? Where are the evangelists? Where are the prophets in our community that can help re-energize this community? And they can be threatening. So it's important that we, here are the 5, but if we rely only, we could end up relying only on the prophets and the evangelists, and we might destroy the community because there's no stability. We're just bringing people in, but not taking care of anybody. This is what happens, by the way, in these megachurches, these evangelical megachurches. Strong evangelists, strong prophet types, and people come in, they spend a little bit of time there, and then they move on. And that happens because they're not leaning into their shepherding and their teaching gifts enough. So it's not always the same in every church. Okay. That's the end of the slide. Questions that I can answer before I put you onto a little bit of an activity to close this out. Questions?
I remember a couple years ago we did something called Pillars of Faith in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Is this like? It seems like it's almost similar.
I'm not familiar with that.
Never heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. Yeah.
We did that here years ago.
Yeah.
I remember that Pillars of Faith.
Yeah.
Like a straw.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the first time something like this has come around, but what I think is really great about APEST is that there's an actual inventory that helps people discover what gifts they have and can discover other people's gifts. That's something that's not done a whole lot in the Catholic Church, is using these tools and then being strategic around the use of them. That's new. Yeah.
So from groups, I'm assuming we have RCIA, catechists, from our perspective, what would be the best way moving forward to utilize this with our teams? Do you recommend that our coordinators extend that to all their catechists and kind of get an idea and an inventory of where our strengths are, and then what's the next step after
Yeah.
that?
Well, the first step would be, first of all, it's good just to have everybody take it and find out what they are and discern. You may have some catechists that are doing it because they were asked and they didn't want to refuse or say no, and they may not really be good catechists because they don't have teaching strengths. And there might be a ton of people out there that have teaching strengths but don't really realize it because nobody's ever given them an opportunity to discover that. So, as a parish, first of all, starting out with your team, I would suspect that most of your catechists have a team, but they might have combinations. Yeah, they may have combinations of gifts, and you might be able to, for example, you might discover that a certain person might be better at a different age group. Like a prophetic gift is going to be better with your teenagers than with second graders. But your shepherds are going to be your shepherd teachers are going to be better with the little kids. You know, people have a way of inadvertently finding their way to where they should be, but not always. That's why a tool like this is really helpful, and they may be in the wrong place, and through something like this you can discern it. Yeah. So the next step is to take it, and I've, you know, a couple of things I'm going to have you do are things that you can do with your teams, just like I'm doing. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
And then parish-wide.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I was telling Sister, the best way, if you can get, it takes a while, and we have to be patient, but you want to get the pastor and you want to get the pastoral staff on board with something like this. You got to start somewhere. So APEST is a good place to start because it's cheap, it's low threshold, it's easy to get into, it's easy to understand. And then, you know, you start with the staff and do that for a while. Maybe a year. Just learn it to discover, you know, again, to name, claim, and aim those gifts just on the team. And learning to reverence each other, because you can't give to others what you haven't acquired for yourself. So as a team, you have to do that. But then the next step after that is kind of a cascading model. Think of those chocolate fountains, you know. The next step is to maybe target your key volunteers in the parish, the council members. Maybe there's, you know, there are people who volunteer as leaders of a particular activity or a particular ministry that's going on in the church. Have them take it and you know, form and educate them in this way of thinking, so that they can begin discerning, and then they can start rolling that out to the people they're leaning on the most. And you know, as you move this out parish wide, it's a great recruiting tool. You can offer it to your parish, let your parishioners pay for it, and they can come. You know, once some of the staff are proficient and understand this. Someone on your team can present this. It's not that hard. You can bring people together, have them take it, present it to them, give them some individual coaching time, and try to say, you know, you might be really good here. And then do it again 6 months later. And you get a new cohort of people to come together. So you kind of cascade that out. Of course, you know, we're happy, Granular Group, we're happy to, you know, help and assist with all of this in any way we can. That's kind of why part of our mission is our mission statement, we've been working on it for a long time, but we help people encounter Christ in the context of community, explore their deepest identity in Him, and that's the gift piece, and then exclaim His love to others. That's, so we can help in any three of those areas, yeah.
Is the APEST test offered in Spanish?
Yes, and French.
Oh, okay. I was pretty sure it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. I was going to have to go ask you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. This is a quick exercise, and then I'm going to have you pair up again and spend some more time, and then we'll conclude. Okay, so I want all of those who got number 1A to stand over here. Yeah, stand right over here. Everybody got number 1P